This channel is supported by Truefire. Truefire is an online library of lessons from some of my favourite players. There's thousands of lessons on there. You can use the promo code JNC40 to get 40% off of any of their courses. Okay, I wanted to do a video on this like a week ago, or maybe a little bit over that now, when it turned out that Guitar Amp Keyboard Centre, which is a shop which I've known about for many years in the UK, kind of closed down. Now, this is a guitar magazine from January 2008, and in here is an advert for lots of things. Now, I did see that Rob Chapman also just did a video because my buddy Chris pointed it out to me, and I'd say go check out Rob's video because he's definitely someone who's got more experience like with guitar stores. I'm mostly only experienced as a consumer, not as someone who has any insider knowledge. But this was what kind of stood out to me, is that in 2008 there was a Guitar Amp Keyboard Centre in Brighton had just opened up their new sort of big showroom. And another thing from here, there's an advert from a company you may have heard of, Mansons, which used to be our sort of main guitar shop in Exeter. And I saw an advert in here, Coda Music, they're still going, and Turnkey, who I seem to remember, but I don't know if Turnkey's a thing anymore, but I used to get their like advert through. So I think it's maybe one of these things where it's interesting because BAX is more of an online retailer as far as I'm aware, like a big European online retailer. I think sort of like Gear for Music or somewhere like that. And then Guitar Amp Keyboard Centre was again, I think, quite a big online presence. That's certainly where I knew of it from, not from being like a shop that you could just go in and play. And yeah, I thought it was an interesting thing. Obviously, like, it's very sad for anyone who worked there. And I bought from BAX and Guitar Amp Keyboard before, so those were two shops that I would buy stuff from because I knew that they're like reputable, had decent returns policy, always had good sort of quick delivery. BAX would come in these massive boxes, I guess sort of like Toman. In terms of having like a place to go and play guitar, shops have a reach far beyond like the geographical location. You think like Andertons as well, right, who have a massive YouTube. I've actually been to Andertons in person. It's actually way smaller than you might expect based on just how big their reputation is and how big their personalities are. And so, yeah, Rob was asking about sort of things that, you know, how we interface with music shops and speculating on kind of reasons for the decline. And in general, I think possibly what has happened to some extent is that around the pandemic, I think for me, I bought more gear than I'd ever bought during lockdown. And I think that was the same through the entire guitar industry in terms of basically folks were spending money on gear and maybe starting to play guitar. I think you'll see from Fender and people like that more people were buying gear in that period of time than previously. And then sort of things have wound down after that, and there's going to be massive economic reasons for all of that stuff that are way beyond me trying to speculate on. But what I found is, so in where I live specifically, so I don't live in a big city or even really near a big city. I live in the southwest. My nearest city is Exeter, which is about 8 miles away. So there used to be Mansons, who were sort of nationally known. You've probably heard of them. Let me know in the comments if you've ever been there. There was Bill Greenall, which was like a more generic music shop. There was Exeter Music Shop, which then turned into Music Room. But the only one that still remains is Project Music, which I think opened when I was a kid, but that was a kind of new one on the block. Now Project Music is still open, and I know some of the guys there. I used to get like Battle of the Bands with Lee, who works there, and I know Conan, I think, just had a kid, another one. And I used to go into Mansons quite a lot and, you know, look at guitars, and if I needed a guitar set up, I'd take it into Mansons. But I do think it is a thing where, like, if it's only Andertons that exists in the UK, or, you know, because we've just lost 2 other kind of fairly big competitors there, or whatever, in the US, I think you've got like Sweetwater, and is Guitar Center, there's less of those around, right? But, you know, I'm not going to drive necessarily for 4 hours to go and try a guitar in London, right? Or whatever, you know. So I think this is the case. Speaking to Chris, my buddy, who lives in New Jersey-ish, I think, there's not anywhere particularly close to him to actually try stuff out. I think Sam Ash used to be his closest place. It's kind of, yeah, it's a bit tricky. Like, I think most of the music selling guitar stuff has gone online already, right? And you think about, like, if you were a new guitarist, or, you know, buying a guitar for your kid, it'd probably you go to Amazon or something like that, or Argos, right? People would go to Argos when I was a kid. But if you don't have a music shop nearby, what are you going to do? You're probably going to end up buying a Squire debut on Amazon, I'd imagine. And then the people that are going to guitar shops are going to be, I think, the people that are looking for a more expensive type of guitar. And I think maybe that is where companies like Project Music, Peach Guitars, and some of these other retailers that aren't maybe the biggest can still have a real important place, where it's like the guitar shop obviously is going to be the place where you go when you want to try a guitar which is maybe more expensive, and maybe where it's like, right, I'm going to drop £4,000-5,000 on a guitar. Where can I go and actually try one of these before buying? And Project Music specifically have quite a lot of Fender custom shop guitars that come through and stuff like that. So I think that is maybe how things are going. I can also remember there was guitarsforyou.co.uk, who was specifically mail order, but they had some really interesting guitars going through there, and I think those guys stopped doing it relatively, well, maybe like within the last sort of 10 years, but I bought a few guitars from there. But it's been the case for quite a while that obviously you get better pricing online versus, you know, going to your local guitar shop. But I do think obviously there's a part of it where going to a guitar shop as a kid was like such an inspiring thing, and you see like these aspirational guitars on the walls and stuff like that. I don't get that same feeling anymore as much as like enjoying playing a guitar just at home. And in some ways I do feel like the buying a guitar, unboxing it experience, in some ways, you know, no one else is necessarily going to have touched that guitar. I do think there are some nice things about that, but equally, without a guitar shop, like, who's going to maintain your guitars? Like, a lot of the techs around here used to work at Mansons or work for Mansons, and who can we now take our amps to get repaired? Once the guitar shops start to go away, I think those other things start to suffer as well a little bit. And I saw in the comments of Rob's video that people were talking about like pubs not necessarily having money to pay bands. And I do think it is the case that there's not loads of really well paid gigs around, but also I don't think it's just gigging musicians that are enough to actually maintain the guitar industry as it is anyway. You need people that have real jobs, and I think people that play guitar as a hobby are probably make up far more of the guitar gear buying public than people that are actually doing jobs from it. So I think you need that as well. So I don't think it's necessarily that impacted by kind of the gigging public. It's kind of my guess on that, but it could be wrong. But let me know your thoughts. Do you still have a local guitar shop? I still have Project Music, which is like 8 miles down the road. Hopefully those guys are doing all right. So maybe go in and buy something from your local music shop if you can afford to, and help them keep the lights on. I wish all the best for the folks at GAC, Guitar Amp Keyboard Centre, and BAX, because obviously those are a lot of people that are involved with those two businesses that are now going to be having to find work. And yeah, a big gap there, I think. Anyway, and hopefully this is not going to be a trend that keeps continuing. Of course, like, there's some businesses that I've been familiar with that have since gone, and that's kind of the thing about business. And if you look through an old guitar magazine, some things would have changed. A lot doesn't change, as it turns out, but that's yeah, two huge parts of the European guitar business that have gone. I'm sure even in the US, some of you guys would have heard Guitar Amp Keyboard. I've never been there, but you know, I've definitely, it's a huge presence. I've bought from there, and likewise with BAX, never been there but bought from there. And maybe that is more like what we're going to be doing going forward, is just buying from more warehousey type stuff. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? It's probably just what it is.